my friends. Welcome to Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Klingenpeel. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. We would love to hear your feedback, or maybe you have some ideas for some guests. So hit me up at paigeklingenpeel@gmail.com. Now today I have two very special guests. I have Rhonda and Maxx Haslett. This is a mother and son duo. So I met Max way back in the day when he was in 6th grade. I had lost track of him until recently when his mom and I were actually on a conference committee. And I was able to catch up with her and hear the stories of Max's journey, which, let me tell you, has been up and down. But such a beautiful story that I said immediately, I have to have you on my show because I know that your story, the way you parented, the way that Max has navigated this is going to lead to such beauty and encouragement to the families around them. And that's the story that we're going to hear a little bit more about today. So Rhonda actually wrote a little bit about Max's story, which I think really summarizes where they've been and where they are today. She says, Max struggled with academic and social pressures, and it really mounted in childhood leading up to the teenage years. Repeated efforts to get better, to find his place, and to seek help from God seemed to fall short, while eventually Max grew weary of the loneliness and sense of failure. The weight of anxiety led him down a destructive path of drugs, suicidal thoughts, and self-harm, which became a temporary escape for Max. Reflecting on this dark time, Max says, though it felt like a quick relief, I was feeling the feeling of death with death. He just couldn't understand or feel the truth of love that was exemplified in his family's life. So throughout Max's struggle, his parents never stopped loving or supporting him. Then one day, in a significant moment, a simple hug from his mom sparked a glimmer of hope. Max recalls that even though he was high on a substance of choice at that time, he felt his mom's love in that hug. And he states, I noticed your love, and that's when things began to change. Woo! How powerful is that? I'm excited to share their story with you today, and I hope that you find encouragement and maybe even some tools potentially for you if you're going through this season of your own. So join me now on this episode of Embracing Your Season with Rhonda and Maxx Haslett. Well, friends, I am so excited that you're joining me here today. I have Rhonda and Maxx Haslett with me, and I'm excited to share your story with so many people out there because I believe it's going to be encouraging. It's going to give them tools to use if they've experienced this season. And that's the thing here at Embracing Your Season is I don't just want to talk about the rainbows and butterflies of life because that's not reality, right? Like we know that sometimes in our parenting walk that it can be rough and we don't always know what to do. And so that's where we gravitate to community that can help us walk through this. And so your story is going to be so impactful. So thanks for being just transparent and bold and sharing your story with us today.
You're welcome. We're glad to be here.
So let's just start out of the gate. Rhonda, tell us a little bit about your family, your marriage, and where you're at today.
All right. So Max is 3 of 4 biological children, and we have a spiritual son who's older than all of my kids. So he's right in the middle there. My husband and I have been married for 33 years this summer and really just dedicated our lives to helping families and to really, because I came out of a broken home. So my whole goal was how can I quickly introduce Jesus and hope to people? And so I kind of dedicated myself to that. And my husband did the same when he was a kid too. So we've been serving the Lord in ministry for 25 plus years as youth pastors. And then just recently in 2017, we moved our family out of obedience here to Fort Wayne. And now we're lead pastors. So yeah, we've got a vibrant, live, active, bold. I think everybody in my home is a bold leader in some way or shape. So that's
cool.
us, the Hasletts.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you did like family ministry for like 25 years. Did that make you feel like you were going to be fully equipped to be parent yourself?
Yeah, I thought for sure that I would be able to. Nobody prepared me for raising teenagers in ministry.
Yeah.
Facts right there.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. It's a whole thing. I mean, honestly, Ronnie, you just need to write a book for the rest of us so that we can like navigate this because you have been through it, which again is it just speaks so much volume over how then you can equip other people through the testimony that you've been given. It's just such a beautiful thing to share your story.
And just to see God in the center of our story just makes, I mean, we both were talking like about a year, almost a year ago, that we want to share God's story in our lives, and it's just been remarkable. So we are actually really grateful to be able to share what God's been doing in our family. And He's a redeeming God. He's a
Yes.
restoring God.
Mhm.
He's a God of hope.
Mhm.
Don't get me crying already, because I'm trying not to.
Oh no, here we go.
Okay.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh. But I mean, that's the thing is that when you've seen where you have been and to where you are
Oh
today, that's
man.
where it's just so tangible, the hope, and it's true and it's lovely and it's just beautiful. So,
Yeah.
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 So, Max, I would love to just start with you and like, what was your school years like? Because I met you in sixth grade, right? Like
Yeah.
we were friends. Actually, you were more friends with my therapy dog Bauer,
Yeah.
who still is known as I'm known as Bauer's mom, right? Like
Yeah.
he has an Instagram feed, like he has 700 followers because he's the cool
That's
kid. I
awesome.
just kind of like, yeah, go along with him, and people come to me. But yeah, it's been a minute since I've seen you. So tell us a little bit about your
Yeah.
school years.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd have to take it back to even just elementary school. I got diagnosed with ADD and ADHD, and you know, anybody who struggles with that in school knows that you have to go to, special ed classroom, and so getting up and standing up to leave for a test and having other just like ways to learn was something that was making me feel very insecure, and so that was something that just sparked even at a very early age in me. And so I was frustrated, I was angry, I didn't
Mhm.
understand, I didn't like being treated differently. And so that just automatically created insecurity and frustration. And just, I was just restless and frustrated. And so I'd come home and I would, tell my mom all about it. And she remembers probably even when I was way younger, just, breaking down and being so frustrated. And so that actually carried over from elementary school, where I was getting in trouble and getting into all, these messes of just like insecurity and all these emotions. And I carried over into middle school. And so middle school, I was getting in trouble a lot more. I mean, just lunch detention, in school suspension, out of school suspension, and just I didn't want to learn because of all of the struggles that I had faced on all my elementary years. So hard to go to school, so hard to pay attention and do what everybody wanted me to do, and so I just had a really hard time doing that and feeling even the courage to do that in the school setting. So I would do these cycles of just like shutting down and then trying again and then shutting down again, and I felt like I was just defeated. And it really sparked a just that defeated mindset that I almost lived by. And like
Mhm.
I don't really know when it was, but there was a point in my school life where I really was just like, okay, I'm done trying and I don't want to try. And then like randomly I would maybe try again, but I feel like every time I would just fall even harder and it was harder to get back up. And
Hmm.
so as my mom said, moving in fifth grade, I didn't have a lot of strong relationships and friendships. And so that caused a lot of loneliness. And I was like switching friend groups, trying to figure out where I fit in. And I just felt like I couldn't fit in anywhere. And so, yeah, that was a big part of middle school. And moving into high school, I started to take the loneliness and do something with it. And so I was, uh, I found weed and started smoking, trying to calm my nerves and trying to just forget about my pain that I was feeling. And just I got into bad relationships. I got into self harm, especially in freshman year. That was big in freshman year, just because I was really lonely and just I felt like I didn't have any friends and I didn't know what to do with myself. And so the self harm actually takes like the mental pain that you feel and portrays it into a physical. And it's almost like I'm doing anything that I can to get relief from the pain I feel in my mind. And
Hmm.
that was a big thing. And drugs developed even more. Just doing whatever I could get my hands on, anything that felt good. And I was just a mess, just trying to figure out how to escape my pain that I was feeling. That, just like, the devil is just, he was at work there and I didn't know what to do. And so it was hard to see any escape besides, the ones that I had to really reach for. Um,
Right. Right.
so that was
Wow.
a big start to just the whole mess.
Well, and I think what you even indicated is that it started in like elementary, right? When it's
Yeah.
those formative years and you were given a diagnosis, which at that point in third grade, you probably didn't even know what that meant, did you?
I just knew that I was hyper and that I had a hard time paying attention.
Yep, yep. And this is what tends to happen is that when kids have behavioral issues, let's quote unquote, because hyperactivity plus sitting in a classroom listening to a teacher teach all the time, like those are not good combinations.
No,
That's just not
not at
conducive to
all.
learning for those kiddos. And so then that creates behavioral problems. So now we have kids that have a label plus behavioral issues, and then they're seeing that they're different because of those two things, and then that creates identity statements, right? Over
Yes.
yourself,
Yep.
which you've even indicated, then moves past just that identity now into the anger, now into the isolation, now into like, what do I do moving forward? And that's where it's
Yeah.
it's such a struggle for
Hmm.
kids and then for parents too, like how to navigate that. So Rhonda, help us hear a little bit about your story and how you helped him navigate, or how did you navigate this season when you saw your kiddo struggling in the school
Yeah.
system?
Yeah, it was a really difficult season because, as a parent, you spend, your energy trying to protect your kids and trying to help set them up for success. And so to see him constantly in trouble, I mean, we were best friends with the principals at every school. When I
Yeah.
say best friends, I mean like we were on like,
Speed dial. Yep.
yeah, speed dial. And it was just really difficult because I felt like uh, I was working really hard to help them understand him, to be able to slow down. I often say you can't fly over speed bumps. And obviously, Max was really struggling. And so I was trying really hard to hear him and trying to advocate for him in the school system to say, look, he's a great kid. He's just frustrated. Can you help him with his frustration? Can you see him for who he is and not just what he's doing? And
Mhm.
so, and I'm not saying every teacher and every principal only saw what he was doing, but the pace of the classroom and the pace of demand versus what he could offer was really difficult. And I just spent a lot of time trying to advocate for him, whether it was elementary school, middle school, or even in the high school when, I just kept saying, are you seeing who he is? He's a great kid. And trying to tell them and to show them that, so that was really, really hard. When he mentioned the freshman year with the self harm, I remember the conversation. Either it was the conversation where he revealed to us that he was harming himself, or it was right around that time. And he said, everyone's so lonely. Like everyone's walking around with like this, and he's like, nobody's helping them. I can't even help them. And I could see that even the compassion inside of him was like he was trying to not just help himself but other people, and he just couldn't seem to make a shift in the atmosphere, and that was really bothering him. So
Mm.
I ended up calling a friend who is a professional counselor, and I just said, hey, my son is really struggling, and he's self-harming. And I don't think I knew at that point that there was illegal substances being used at that point. I don't think I knew then that. um, and I'm just going to say that in the beginning, we were working really hard. I was working really hard. We were, as a family, working hard to help prepare other people. And at that point, I realized he was tired of mommy doing it all for him.
Mm. Mhm.
And I remember a conversation where he said, I wish you knew how it feels to never measure up. And I was so broken to hear that because I was constantly telling him, you're amazing, you're awesome, telling everybody he's amazing, he's awesome. But I think that by my advocacy, what he was actually hearing was, you can't do it.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so my friend encouraged me to back off and really let him begin to realize that I do believe he can do it. But that was really hard because it was awful. Like he's self harming, and then it began to spiral even more. And so backing off was still extremely difficult. But we began to understand that in order for him to know that we believe he does measure up, we had to back off so he could see it
Mhm.
for himself too. So I don't know that he knew that, but that was part of our
Hmm.
strategy. And if I just may say that when later, as he was, he'd already talked about how he moved to substance abuse, and it was so scary near the end. When I say near the end, because there was a place where we were like, and this is what I want to say is that near the end it was so scary, and we realized that healthy families know where to get help and when to get help. And so we reached out outside of our home to try to get help
Mm-hmm.
because it was literally out of our control. Even if I quit my job, even if I stayed with him all the time, there was just
Right.
no way that we could intervene at that point. And that's where we knew, okay, it wasn't just school, it was home, it was church, it was everywhere. It was just, we needed help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you could even see the progression, right? So it started maybe in elementary, middle school, high
Oh,
school, and that's where you see the difference and how if kids don't get the opportunity to heal some of those things that happen to them in that season, that they bring it with them and then it amplifies because they
oh
have
yeah.
access to more potentially even dangerous coping mechanisms that they didn't have access to before. And so
Hmm.
when you're talking about advocating for your kid, I just think there's so much value in your statement of, but I can't do it all for them, because that actually translates that they're not capable. And that's the one thing that they need the most, right? Is just
And
being
I had
reminded
no
that they're
idea.
capable, right?
Hmm.
Who knows that off the top of their head, right? Like that's where this conversation is so important, is that parents out there, you think you're loving your kiddo well by advocating, by being in every fight for them. But the reality is that actually handicaps them. And that does, it prevents them from fighting those battles on their own, especially as they get older. Now, we're not talking about third graders, right? You needed to step in.
Right.
Middle
Yeah.
school,
There was
you probably needed to step in. But as they got older, yeah,
Yeah. And
that's
I don't think I
incredible.
realized that my deep, deep love for him was actually getting in the way, and I couldn't see what he needed. And, you don't always know until there's either a tension within yourself or a tension within the environment. Then that's usually the trigger that something needs to shift, but we couldn't figure it out in the moment. It's after here. It's after everything is over that I'm going, okay, I that there was nothing wrong with advocacy as an elementary, but at some point I needed to make a shift to love differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think, and I know, Rhonda, you and I have talked offline about this, is I can relate to this, right? Like I have a kiddo who has the most amazing heart and who serves so well and is just so compassionate majority of the time. But when this kiddo has certain interactions with adults where the adult is disrespectful or the adult is
Mhm.
expecting, just the expectations are inappropriate, or and my kid pushes back, right? And then I have to deal with the fact that, like, I don't want to condone my child disrespecting an adult, but at the same time I want to go to that adult and be like, but you shouldn't be talking to kids that way, right? And so it's this dissonance that I'm like, how do I help navigate this for my kiddo? And so what I have found, and as you've indicated as well, is that I just have to equip my kid. I have to have those conversations with him of like, what is it, what needs to happen in order for you to respond appropriately to this adult that might be have an inappropriate expectation for you or isn't respectful to you. And that's so hard. It's so hard when you know that injustice is happening to your kid, and yet that's what we need to do. But there are times, as you indicated, when Mama Bear does need to step up and Mama Bear does need to call the school. I mean, my gosh, they know when they need to talk to Paige Klingenpeel, they know I will absolutely throw my kid under the bus if he's done something inappropriate. But tell me, what did the teacher do that elicited that reaction out of my child? And then we can discuss what are actually healthy next steps. I mean, it's just crazy sometimes
I'm
that
being
that
very careful,
take, right?
very careful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard dynamic of trying to advocate for your kid, support your kid, but equip them for the real world where it's not
Yep.
fair. Life just isn't fair. And yeah, their behavior has consequences and there needs to be consequences. So it is all of that. But going towards Max, you were talking a little bit about some of your unhealthy coping mechanisms. You mentioned marijuana, which is very common, especially right now in our area. I just spoke to the principal last night of our large high school where THC in vapes is a huge epidemic because in the state of Indiana, we're surrounded by two states that have weed that is legal. So adults are bringing this down, they're giving it to kids, and kids are doing it in the school system. So, walk me through a little bit about why that became a go to, how that potentially even helped in the moment. But then when you realize, wow, this really isn't ultimately the best thing I should be doing for myself?
Yeah, so I don't even know how it got introduced. I knew of marijuana. I knew what it did to a person and made them feel good. And, so I seeked it out, and, I found somebody who was providing. And so I got some. And, when I did it, I was like, oh my goodness, I've been so depressed, and this is my little dopamine hit right here. Like, I've never been this happy before. What? Like, nothing's made me feel this good before. And so I do it and I do it and I do it. And it's just like, it just becomes an obsession. And, I honestly, before I even did weed, like I was vaping and, doing nicotine products. And so like, just, I wasn't afraid to smoke weed because I had already like smoked cigarettes and vaped before.
Sure.
And so it's like, and so I, I get into that, and then after one thing, it's like I'm not gonna say that like weed became not enough, but once I was just kind of in that headspace of like, okay, being high feels good, being high is where I'm comfortable, then it's like I'm not afraid to expand, and so then we go to like, um, you know, kids at school are getting diagnosed with these things like ADHD or other things like that, or like depression or anxiety. And so they get medicine and they don't want to take their medicine, but I'm a drug addict. And so I want to get high. And so I'll take your medicine. And so it's just like, it's terrible, but that's the way it works. It's not always an adult, but even in the schools, it's just, and again, like kind of pointing back to the sadness factor and the loneliness of the kids in the school. It's like, half of them don't like the school setting. Half of them do. I'm not going to say like, because people love to learn. People love to gain,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, new insights and learn cool facts. I do myself, but it's like when you're in a certain setting that you feel forced to be in, even as a teenager, you rebel, you do things that you want to do. And so, I'm taking pills, I'm smoking weed, I get into like psychedelics and just, basically again, like I said earlier, anything I can get my hands on. And so I wasn't really chasing any specific feeling, mainly just that I wouldn't feel the way I would when I was sober.
Sure.
And so and so yeah, and so then, um I was self-harming too, and I already kind of explained the thought behind that as well. And it's like, you're pairing death with death in the moment. You don't even realize like how bad that is, and you're just, you're harming yourself two times over. You're already hurting in your brain, and now you're hurting physically. And it's just like, the the things that you'll do just to get that relief and that escape. It's
Yeah.
really crazy. And, I even got into pornography and, started having sex with my girlfriend. And so it's like, just doing all these rebellious things, not just to be rebellious, but because like, anything that feels good, anything that feels better than the pain I'm going through. So,
Right, right. And the world can provide that, right? Like that's the thing that happens so quickly for our kids is that they have exposure to some of these things that do give that dopamine hit, that do give the feel good chemicals, and it's instantaneous. And they
mhm,
see the world around them, whether it's media or it's TV, it's music or their friends, and it shows that all these things should be practiced and that they're awesome and they should be doing these things. But in reality, as you indicated, that actually it leads you lower than when you started because
yeah,
drugs in itself, it will not keep that dopamine level at that same consistency. Self-harm
yeah,
behavior, suicidal ideation, like all of those things actually make us lower than when we started. But kids don't know that. They
Mhm.
just are in it for the temporary.
yeah,
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about then when things started changing for you. What was that
yeah.
moment where things shifted?
Okay. So um, like my mom said, we were in, uh, or she was wanting to reach out to, outside organizations to help me. And so I went to a program for 13 months. And in that program, I was still dealing with a lot of the things I was dealing with, but, I wasn't really doing drugs as much because it's like, it was really hard to do drugs there because it's a facility, it's a residential, they have protocols and things like that, drug tests. And so, but there I was getting a lot of therapy, group therapy. They were giving me some hobbies to start kind of diving into. And so they were actually really good at what they do. But I think the biggest thing for me was realizing that I was affecting more than just myself through the things I was doing. But still, it's like, the only person who really mattered was me, because I just didn't want to feel bad. Like, I just wanted to feel good. I didn't care about like anybody. And it sounds bad, but I mean, that's the truth sometimes once you get wrapped into your mess. And so, once I kind of realized, it's like, okay, I'm kind of affecting my family around me. And my attitude needs to shift a little bit. And just like realizing, they wanted to diagnose me with like bipolar 2 and generalized anxiety disorder. And so they got me on meds and stuff. And
When
so
you
it's
say
like,
they, who is they?
oh,
Just to
like,
clarify.
no, yeah, like psychologists.
Okay.
And the residential facility, they have like people who are there to help you. Obviously,
Yeah.
psychologists are there usually to help. Okay, and so meds can help and things like that can help, but I was still just in these ups and downs. And the bipolar 2 is more long term emotional effects. So basically, it's like 1 month I am terrible, and then the next month I'm good, and then the next month I'm even worse, and then the next month I'm not as good as before. And so it's like my good months start to slowly go down, and my bad months start to get worse and worse and worse. And so that's just kind of like what the bipolar 2 was. And so I eventually got out, and I didn't actually graduate from that. I
From the program.
Yeah, I didn't graduate from the program. I got, really emotional and tired of that cycle. And I tried to end that cycle by trying to take my life. And I mustered up the courage to, like, tell somebody. And so they took me to the hospital, and I spent a week in their psych in Louisiana. And so came back home. I struggled for like 3 more months, just partying and doing a lot of things that I couldn't do for the 13 months. And
Mm.
so, but I got a job and I was still doing some school. And so eventually, and I don't want to be taking up too much time.
This
There's
is the
so
part that we want to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So let me interject real quick. So when he was at Heartlight, he feels like they helped him like emotionally make some shifts. I sensed that.
Yeah.
He didn't come home saying that, but after he has
I
given
matured a lot.
after he gave his life to the Lord, and he was willing to see
Well,
things from a different angle, he was able to see how much progress he'd made at Heartlight, you know.
Mm. That's awesome.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
and when he came home, it was obvious to me like this spirit of death, or this I want to die, was broken off of him, and that was very obvious. And that was pretty exciting. And then when he came home, he went right back into those habits, and it was really scary because we knew that God said it was time for him to come home, and we knew that God just kept saying, be still, be still, be still. But as he's going to talk about, he just kind of got wrapped up, like radically wrapped up in all the things that he was doing before he left, and but longer spans of time. And so, yeah,
Mm.
I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, and so eventually I was at this party and I got my phone and my wallet stolen, and I was just super messed up. And yeah, that was crazy. But there was a guy from our church who plays guitar, and I play guitar. I love playing music. And so even though he was a Christian and I was not, I would still go and play music with him. And so he picked me up, actually, like off like the side of the road, like at a Kroger, because I was coming from that party to hang out with him
Oh,
and
wow.
play
Yeah.
guitar. And so I was just a mess. But later on, I'm hanging out with this guy playing guitar again. And, our local Christian radio station, WBCL, they host concerts at some churches. And this guy gets opportunities to go and help set up the stage and do stuff with his son. But he told me if he gets another opportunity, would I like to go and get some experience? And I'm like, okay, Christian concert. I'm not really a Christian, but set up a stage for a known band. I mean, like, that'd just be cool. And so I'm like, yeah, I would love to do that. And so we're playing, and he gets a phone call, and he comes back like an hour later, and he's like, Max, you wouldn't believe what just happened. Somebody told me that there two people dropped out of their position to help out one of these concerts. And he told me about it, and I was like, okay, all right, this is happening quick. But yeah, let's do it. And it was gonna be the next day. But one really cool thing that, I would love to dig into more eventually was just that, you know, I could feel God speak to me when I said yes to going to the concert. Like, I wasn't a Christian, but I still believed in God. And
Mm-hmm.
like, God spoke to my heart, and he was like, I've done all these things. Because before, like, God was lining things up. It's hard to explain, but like,
We don't have time for all that, but there's so much to this
God
story.
was lining
Yeah.
everything up just perfectly, and he was speaking to my heart. And I could just hear him telling me, like, you're gonna have to make a decision, you're gonna have to choose, but I've made it so easy for you. And so I'm like, all right, we set up the stage the next day, and I'm like kind of nervous because I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. And we're just there, and like, music gets going at the concert, and I'm just kind of standing awkwardly around while everybody else is like worshiping God. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. But like, I start reading the lyrics, and I start, noticing everybody else's joyfulness. And I didn't have that joyfulness. I didn't have any
Mm-hmm.
peace. And I was constantly searching for like a feel good thing. And so just seeing all these people, how they were feeling, I wanted that. And like, I just started reading the lyrics on the screen, and like, it was just breaking things off of me. And I was just reading things about like joyfulness and love and the peace that Jesus brings. And it was just, God was like moving on my heart so heavily. I could feel his Holy Spirit, and just chains were breaking off of me, and it was like scales were getting removed from my eyes, almost like,
Wow.
Saul from the Bible.
Yeah.
And so it was like, I just felt like, eventually I start singing these lyrics, and I'm like, okay, Jesus, like, if you can help me, then help me, and I'm here, and I surrender these things to you. And so I just raised my hands and started worshiping God, and like, I just start crying. It's like I can finally breathe again. I really felt his Holy Spirit so like physically and emotionally. I don't know how to explain it, but God was just there setting me free from those things. And I was like, God, if this is how you really make me feel, like, if this is what you're really all about, like, I'll serve you forever. Like, if you'll just help me, be better. And
I'm not
so,
crying.
Incredible.
and so, yeah, so I
Mm.
just opened up my heart to God, because he helped me. He really helped me open up to him. But taking that step is like the hardest part. Telling God, it's like, okay, I don't know if you're really who they say you are, and I don't know what to do with myself anymore, and I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's
Mm-hmm.
just in that moment of surrender, God really took control. But funny thing is, the next day, because like, I didn't know the balance between what I could and couldn't do still. So like, the next day I went and smoked pot, because I was like, I don't know if I still have to get rid of this. And so, but once I did it, I was like, obviously I felt good, but it really wasn't as good as like when I was worshiping God. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely
Mm-hmm.
felt more high worshiping Jesus than I did when
Yes,
I was
let's
smoking
go.
marijuana. And
Yeah, that's
so
so awesome.
I made a decision at that moment. I was just like, I don't need to do drugs anymore, and
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had any withdrawals from anything. Um, and it's just been great. Like,
That's
since
incredible.
then, I've been growing. Just doing ministry. It's been
Tell her
amazing.
what you're enrolled in and what you're doing right now.
So I'm actually in ministry school right now. So I'm taking classes and reading books, and getting into God's word, learning about how to establish a church, all that kind of stuff. Because I know God has a call in my life to ministry. I don't know whether or
Mm-hmm.
not it'll be like the missions field, or an evangelist, or a pastor, but I'm here getting certified. Hopefully I can get ordained eventually, just to make myself available for what God has. And it's all that
That's
God's
right.
done for me, that I feel like that I'm so willing to give my whole life back. And so,
Mm-hmm.
it's my hope that, that my story will just, bring hope to the families, and that, like, mom's over here crying because she remembers all the things that we were going
Yeah.
through. And,
That's
we've
right.
talked
Yeah.
about this, and it's like, but where I am now and what God has done with me and in our family, That's what it's all about. And we
Mm,
can go on and on about how terrible it was, but the real like story is that God stepped
Yeah.
in and God was faithful, and
Yeah.
no matter how stuck I was, eventually God let me out, and I wouldn't be the person I am today without my story. And
yeah,
so
yeah, that's
yeah.
good. Yeah, and
Mhm.
that's what I love about not only you sharing your testimony, and again, people are gonna be impacted by that. That's the ministry, the story of the transformation of where you've been,
Yep.
where you are, and because of the grace of Jesus, right? There's so
Yep.
much power behind that. But the way that you get to just move into the freedom that you live in now because
Yeah.
of that experience is just it's so beautiful, and it's just
Yeah.
encouraging for the rest of us that get to hear this as well. Now, Rhonda, I mean, speaking to the parents out there, what if they have a kiddo that is struggling, and kind of going through this season? Like, what are some like words of encouragement for them to hopefully get to this place where Max is today?
Well, first, I just simply want to say that I know it sounds absolutely churchy, but without the Lord giving me peace
Mm,
in
hmm.
the middle of the storm and reminding me again and again that He is present, He never leaves me, He never forsakes me. He says, in this world you'll have trouble, but don't worry, I've overcome. And so to know without a doubt His character in the middle of the storm was like so
Mm,
huge to me. I
that's
mean,
good.
when we went to go pick Max up, I mean, we were going to pick him up after he tried to take his life. And they were like, you have to bring him home. And I'm like, what are we going to do?
Hmm.
How do we navigate this? And the Lord literally kept saying to me, I will give you the next step. Just lean into me, know my character, lean into my character, and trust me, trust me, trust me. And God would give us like little nuggets. Like when we went to pick him up from the one of the places that we stayed overnight to get him home, he didn't even know it, nor did he remember, but he was humming,
Graves in the garden.
"You turn graves into gardens." But he's
Oh
humming it,
yeah,
and I'm thinking, does he have any idea what? I mean, so God was just giving me nuggets and reminders that He is with us,
yeah.
and just
Mm,
such a peace. And then when he came home and he was doing all these things, the Lord literally kept saying to me, your job is to love him. My job is to save him.
ooh,
I'm the
yeah, that's
savior,
good.
you're the mom. And if
Mm,
you'll stay in the mom role, I'll stay in the savior role.
Hmm.
And to be still in that, even when it didn't look good, I had to hold on to the promises that He'd given me in the middle of it all. And God gave me so much peace and so much like the community even around me would sometimes just be a piece of just, we got you, because our story became our community story. And when I was really having a hard time, the community was important. So not only did I have the assurance of God's character and my relationship with Him, but the promise that He gave me, the stability of His word, and the community just to come around when I was, sometimes having problems. There was a lady at our church who would come to me and she'd take the palm of my hand and she would put a circle like this and she would say, right here, God has him in the center of his heart. He's watching him and he's got him tethered to him. You be
mm.
still and know that God is God. So
Wow.
there's so much, but I know we don't have time to tell the whole story. Maybe that's another
There's
podcast, but
absolutely, yeah, part 2, right, of all the beauty in that. Well, I mean, thank you so much again, guys, for sharing your story here today. I just hope that it's encouraging for those that are listening, that just hold on hope, believe in the character of God, that He is going after your kids even harder than you go after them, and that is something that we can rest in knowing. And Max, I'm so proud of you, like, just such a cool turnaround, and even though you've been through literally the valley of the shadow of death, like, you are
Yeah.
here today proclaiming His goodness from the mountaintops. So thanks for your boldness in sharing today. And thanks, Rhonda, for being here as well. So thanks, guys.
thanks,
Yeah.
Paige.
Awesome.
What an incredible testimony. I mean, just the things that Max has been through and where he is today, and the fact that truly we can trust God with our kids. In fact, that's my first takeaway is something that Rhonda said at the end. She says that God is the one that saves, and my role as a parent is one to love. How often that we come alongside our kids and we want to fix their problems, fix their mistakes, or help them go down the path with so much intensity, it actually pushes them away. It can even create some rebellion. It's because we have now put ourselves in a role that was never intended to be our role to begin with. And as hard as it is to surrender our kids at the feet of Jesus, that literally is everything that we need to do, and just put it in his hands and say, God, take my kid, lead him in your ways, bring him healing, bring him guidance, and allow me to love him well. That's where we can just surrender it. And that ultimately has huge transformational impact on their life. My other takeaway is we talked a little bit about advocacy. So with advocacy, we get to go alongside our kids, support them, help others know how to interact with them or provide the best services for them. But as Rhonda pointed out, that sometimes our attempts to advocate was actually destructive for our kids ultimately. So often we don't want our kids to fail. So with our fear of them failing, we inhibit or even handicap them from experiencing the struggles that are necessary to grow and mature. So think to yourself, am I overstepping my advocacy for my child? Am I preventing an opportunity for them to grow and mature? Because with all things where growth is the end result, it takes this tension, it takes this effort, it takes this building up of resistance in order to grow. And so we want our kids to build resilience. And sometimes that means that we need to take a step back, love them well by allowing natural consequences to happen, and only step in and advocate when it's absolutely necessary. And finally, I know this could be a trigger warning for some people out there, but Max talked a little bit about self-harm behavior and even some suicidal thoughts. As a clinician, I first want to point out that I am not your counselor. I am not your therapist, nor can I intervene on your personal nature with your own kiddos. But I can speak, statistically speaking, that when kids struggle with self-harm, they're actually attempting to cope with the negative interactions or circumstances that they have in their life. Again, counterintuitive for us parents. If we find out that our kids are self-harming, we automatically could think, well, they're potentially suicidal or that they're leading to more dangerous behaviors, and we don't always know how to intervene. My suggestion is talk to them about it. Eliminate the fear that you're experiencing. Instead, be curious. What is leading you to these choices? And secondly, get a professional counselor involved. We have been trained to navigate these conversations, to walk alongside them, because regardless of the motivation of your child, what's causing them to self-harm, we know that it is cry for help and we need to intervene. That's our job as parents, to help them understand that they're not alone in this battle and that we love them so much that we want to get them the help that they need so that they can start healing. So friends, that's our conversation here today on Embracing Your Season. Thanks again so much for joining me. Remember that we drop new podcasts every Tuesday on every platform. We're also on YouTube, so check us out on the Homeward YouTube channel. Again, thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.